think you're prejudiced? Do you think you're racist? You are. The question is, do you discriminate? Now let me tell you what I mean by all that. We are all of God's children. Every shade, every gender, every pronoun, every location on this planet or orbiting this planet, we are all prejudiced. To be prejudiced means to prejudge. We all prejudge. It's built into how we process information. In order for us to simplify the bombardment of information and varying factors of things, we tend to prejudge in order to come up with a quicker decision. So we're all prejudiced in that way. And I'm sure in your life, you know the times where you have prejudged. Now, are we all racist? On some measures, yeah, because being racist is a part of being prejudiced. It's like a branch of it. It's not the same, but it's down that avenue. So, and there's various ways to be racist. Now, obviously, there's the there's the malicious, harmful, mean way of being racist, where you think that you're above someone and someone is below you. And then there's kind of the more benign, like it didn't really mean to be offensive type racism, where you're just pointing out differences. And there are differences. There's differences amongst genders, or differences amongst nationalities, amongst religions. There's fucking differences in households and in families. So to point out differences, it's not necessarily a bad thing. That's why it's benign. So we know bad racism. But there's also other types of racism that's like, hey, you do stuff different than I do. What's up with that? That's funny. That's funny to me. Maybe something's funny to you. The real question is, do you discriminate? Because to discriminate is to then either intend, play a part in, or have some desire for some ill will to happen to someone else based upon how you prejudge them. So or maybe not even to how you prejudge them. Just to discriminate is to say, look, I, consciously or subconsciously, don't want you to succeed. I don't want you to prevail. I don't want you to progress. You have to be behind me. Even more so, you have to be put in your place. That's discrimination. And that's whether it's racial, sexual, in the workplace, whatever. To discriminate is essentially to say someone, an entity, a group, an individual, they have to be put in their place. And it's usually never up. You don't hear of someone discriminating like upwardly, like, I gave you more than you should have because I don't like you. Like, what? That doesn't match. So everyone's prejudiced. Like I say, I know I've had instances in my life where I have been prejudiced and didn't realize it, but knew that it was out of a good heart and good intent, but was just like, oh yeah, maybe someone else pointed it out to me, or maybe at some point I realized it. But I remember once I made a funny joke that I had heard, recited it to someone, and then someone was like, oh, that's a joke against me, against my people. And I was like, oh, I didn't think about that. It was a funny joke. But I didn't think about that. And it was like, oh, damn. My bad. Thank you for educating me on that. Someone just slipped me some shit, and I didn't even know that, it was some bad shit right there. Thank you for pointing that out. That's why we need perspective. That's why you can't just live in the same old community and go to the same old places and just talk to the same old people and just rehash the same old experiences. You need diversity, because once you see how differently people live, then you see how, in many ways, we're the fucking same. But if you don't even take time to notice the differences, how can you then come back to the common beauty? So we all, maybe I'm a bad person, or I just tell bad jokes. But there was another time in college, and this one was interesting. This was an interesting joke. So I'm predominantly black with some other things going on in there. Grew up predominantly in the inner city. So in the inner city in America, there's a dynamic that happens a lot of times where a lot of black and brown consumers don't feel respected in the various stores that they go to. And so in a lot of inner cities, there are businesses that are owned by people who don't live in those communities. And so what the problem is that many of those business owners don't fully know how to interact and vibe and communicate with the communities that they're in. But also, they do witness sometimes some of the bad bullshit part and bullshit people of those communities. So sometimes when black and brown people go, or are forced to, for lack of options, when they go to some of these businesses and they get shitty service or they get ignored, black and brown people, we kind of experience that as a common experience. Like, yeah, you know how it be sometimes when you go in these particular stores. And essentially what we mean is when you go into the stores that don't give a shit about you. So I was telling a joke to a friend of mine who also was black. And I made a reference to how I didn't get change like I was supposed to. And I made a reference like, yeah, it's like how it is, when you go to those stores. Sitting basically next to me was another friend of mine who I didn't know was half one of those stores. You get what I'm saying? So he kind of chimed in like, hey man, I'm half one of those stores. And I was like, oh, my bad, man, but I didn't mean to sound offensive, but let me explain to you where I'm coming from. And in right there, which would have never fucking happened, from that uncomfortable moment, which I did spark, but coming from that authentic, shared, uncomfortable moment, me and my man had a chance to talk about our different common experiences of what it's like to be on the opposite side of that experience. What it's like to feel like people come into your community and they want money from you, but they don't give a shit about you and they look down on you. What's it like on the other side of you come into a community trying to do business and you're not quite sure how to communicate and vibe with the community that you're in? What's that like? So from that uncomfortable moment, built around what? Fucking prejudice, a prejudging. Even if you've gone through a certain amount of experience with somebody, if you want to really be raw about it, if you haven't really talked to that person, if you haven't really kicked it with that person, if you don't really know that person, you're prejudging. Even if you got A, B, and C bit of information, there's the rest of the fucking alphabet that you are then prejudging. So we got a chance from that uncomfortable moment built around prejudice to then, and we became so much cooler after that. And we saw each other, at least I know I did, we saw each other differently. It was like, instead of you being half that store, you my man. You know what it's like being in the city. So we had now a common, instead of it being two people on the opposite sides of a situation, now it's like we both know what it's like in the inner city. And now we're here in college and doing whatever else we do in common. So that's what I'm saying. We're all prejudiced. We're all fucking prejudiced. And at times we're all racist. Hopefully not malicious, bad, mean, evil, kill people, degrade people, racist. Maybe it's just like, hey, dog, why you wear your pants like that? You know what I'm saying? Or why we use this with our food. That can be funny. Educational even. So, but it's when you discriminate. When you consciously or subconsciously want to put somebody else in their place. That's that bullshit. That's the shit we don't need in this world. So, tell me what you think.